your Bible this morning, the book of 2 Kings, chapter number 20. 2 Kings, chapter number 20. Good to see you here this morning. We thank the Lord for His blessings. How you like this cool weather? It's pretty good, doesn't it? Good to see Keith back on the drums this morning. Amen. He's been out for a few weeks. Glad to have him back, Keith. I read a little story the other day I thought was kind of cute. I'll share it with you about, the blonde jokes that went around years ago. This is one of them. Anyway, this highway patrolman was driving down the road to his car. And there was a blonde that was coming towards him. And he happened to notice, number one, that she was going awful fast. And number two, that she had on her steering wheel knitting needles, and she was knitting while she was driving. You heard of people driving and texting. Well, here she is driving down the road about 80 miles an hour, and she's knitting. And boy, he just, he said, I've got to stop her. She's going to have a wreck, kill somebody. And so he spun around and he pulled at the side of her, and she looked over at him. She's still knitting. She looked over at him, and he motioned her to roll down her window. And she rolled down her window, and he said, pull over. And she said, no, it's a scarf. All the way along. All right, 2 Kings chapter number 2. Chapter number 20. 2 Kings chapter 20. Hezekiah. I will speak, this is kind of a New Year's type sermon, but Hezekiah was a king of Judah. He was a good king. Very godly man. He led the nation in the way that God would have them to go. But there was a king by the name of Sennacherib, and Sennacherib was a king of Assyria. And he was a pretty powerful man. And the Assyrians were conquering this country and that country, and he sent ambassadors to Hezekiah and said, you're next. We're coming after you. And he said, don't think that your God can deliver you, because he can't. These other nations that we've already conquered, they had their gods, and they thought they could deliver them, and they couldn't. And just as we squashed them, we're going to squash you. And Hezekiah took that letter, that message, and brought it before the Lord. And I want to read to you what God said to Hezekiah. Look at verse 32 of chapter number 19. Therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city, that's speaking of Jerusalem, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shield, nor cast a bank against it. Jerusalem was a walled city, and that phrase, cast a bank against it, means that they're going to pile dirt up, get over the wall. And he said he's not going to be able to do that. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into this city, saith the Lord. Now, what happened was, you go down to verse number 35, the Assyrians got their army together, here they came. They camped outside the city of Jerusalem. They're getting ready to go in. Okay? They got all their big army, all of their men, all of their plans, all of their war machines, and they intend to conquer Jerusalem. But God said, they're not going to. A shield's not going to enter this city. They're not going to cast an embankment against it. An arrow's not going to be shot into this city. I'm going to protect Jerusalem. Amen. And in verse number 35, an interesting way that it's said, I'd like to read it. And it came to pass that night, the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. That's 185,000 dead soldiers during the night. That's how many died. And the Bible says, this is kind of interesting to me. The Bible says when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. Well, it doesn't mean that the dead corpses arose. It means simply that the ones that survived found out that 185,000 of their troops had been killed during the night by some kind of disease that God struck them with. And so Sennacherib, in verse number 36, the boastful king of Assyria, had to turn around and go back home, as the old saying goes, like a dog with his tail tucked between his legs. Now, God protected them. Amen. Hezekiah prayed to God, and God protected them. Now, a lot of times, good news is followed by bad news. Isn't that true? There are a lot of times in life that, boy, you just go through a great day, everything's wonderful, and the telephone rings or whatever, and you find out you've got a problem. And in chapter 20, and verse number 1, that's what happened to Hezekiah. He can go through this time of rejoicing because God has defeated his enemy, and yet now, in verse number 1, in those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amoz, came to him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Wow. What would you do? What would you do if the doctors came in and said, I hate to tell you this, but unless there's some kind of miracle outside of what we're able to do, you're not going to pull through this. You're not going to make it. You're living your last days. Get everything ready. Make things as easy on your family as you possibly can. Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Think about that. What changes would I make in my life? I would imagine that every one of us would have something in our lives that we want to correct or make right. Or maybe there's someone that we've been at odds against, that we want to, try to breach that rift that was in our relationship. So I want to give you just 3 thoughts this morning, and these were thoughts that came into my head when I thought about, what if this was my last few days on earth? What if I only had a week to live, or a day to live, or a month, or even a year? What changes would I want to make in my life? 3 things I want to bring your attention. Number 1, I want to love more perfectly. The Bible says that the greatest of all the gifts of God, the greatest of them is love. Now think about that. There were a lot of gifts that were given. There was a gift of tongues, and the gifts of interpretation, and the gifts of, we could just go on. But God said the greatest of them is a gift of love. That's a gift I've always prayed for. God, if you want to give me a gift, that's the gift that I want. That's the gift I'd like to have more than any other gift. The gift of love. Now the Bible teaches that in the last days that love is going to be misdirected. For instance, in 2 Timothy chapter number 3, verses 1 and 2, Paul said that in the last days perilous times will come. And then he said this, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. Men shall be lovers of their own selves. Now, we're not told in the Bible to love ourselves. We're told in the Bible to love others. But here we find Paul saying that men will become lovers of their own selves. And then if you read that chapter in the Bible, you're going to find out he lists a whole long list of things that are bad things that will be the result of people being in love with themselves. Children will be disobedient to their parents, and it goes on down the line. So that's a misdirected love. Jesus said in the book of Matthew chapter number 24, he said, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many will wax cold. One thing that's in shortage in the world that we live in today, and that's genuine love. Sometimes even among the members of the family of God. So let's talk about love for just a minute. You know, I found 5 things. I went through my Bible last night, and I came up with 5 things that God says we're to love. 5 different categories that God says we're to love. Number 1, in Matthew 22:36, we find the great commandment, where the lawyer came to Jesus and he said, Master, which is the greatest of all the commandments? There were 10 of them. Which is the greatest of all the commandments? And Jesus said the greatest of all the commandments was this, that you love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. This is the greatest of the commandments, that we love God supremely, that we love God above anything and everything else, that the greatest love that we give out is a love that we give to our Maker, the love that we give to God. And so number one, we're to love God supremely. And we have to ask ourselves the question, do I do that? Do I really love God supremely in my life? Am I the most important figure, or is God most important in my life? Who is my love directed at, first of all? And it should be God. And then second of all, the Bible teaches that we're to love our mates. In Ephesians 5:25, Paul said, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. And a lady came to me one time, she said, preacher, you know that it doesn't say that the wife is supposed to love her husband in that chapter, and it doesn't. But Paul didn't leave that out, because when he wrote to Timothy, he said this, that the older women teach the younger women to love their husbands. Now, you know, that tells me something. That love is not just an emotion that's either there or not there. Oftentimes, that's the way we treat it. It's just something that's there or it's not there. Love is something that's a matter of choice. That the older women teach the younger women to love their husbands. That they're taught to love their husbands. That the husbands love their wives as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. And by the way, husbands, the lady folks like to hear it once in a while. Amen? They like to hear it once in a while. I'm reminded of a little story I heard about one wife that said to her husband, she said, you know, we've been married for 30 years. And in 30 years, you have not told me that you love me. And he said to her, look, I told you when we got married. If it ever changes, I'll let you know. Well, the average woman's looking for a little bit more than that, right? I try to tell my wife every day that I love her. I try to tell the Lord every day how much I love him. You see, we're to love God first of all. But if you're a husband, you're to love your wife. If you're a wife, you're to love your husband. And then there's another category. The Bible teaches that we're to love our neighbor. Jesus even gave us a parable about that. Love your neighbor. And the question was, who is my neighbor? What does that mean? Love your neighbor. Who is my neighbor? They asked the Lord. And he gave a little short parable. Luke chapter number 10, I believe it is. He said, a certain man was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho or vice versa. And he fell among thieves. And they beat him up. And they robbed him. And they left him half dead. I read that one day and all of a sudden that jumped out at me. And I thought, what does it mean to be half dead? They left him. What did Jesus mean when he said the man was half dead? Well, he was half alive, but he was half dead. Then you can ask yourself the question, which half was dead? Which half was alive? That's not what he was talking about. Here's what I believe that means. They beat him up so badly that if he did not have outside help, he would have died. That he was so beaten up that unless someone came and had mercy on him and helped him out, he was going to die. He wasn't going to make it. So he was half dead, is a phrase that Jesus used. And sure enough, here came a priest by. Well, he's a religious man. You'd think if anybody would help, he would help. But you know what? He saw the guy, and he just went by on the other side. He bypassed him. The priest bypassed him. Here came a Levite by. Who's a Levite? That's a priestly tribe. And you'd think, my goodness, this man, that whole tribe is given to serving God. You'd think, this man would certainly help this fellow. But he didn't. He also went by on the other side. And then a Samaritan came by. Who was a Samaritan? They were, for lack of a better way to explain it, what they would have called back in the Old West, half-breeds. Samaritans were Jews that intermarried with Gentiles during the captivity And the Jews didn't want them, and the Gentiles didn't want them. And they were despised and looked down on them. They were kind of an outcast people. But here came this Samaritan by, and he saw the man. And the Bible says he had compassion on him. He had mercy on him. And he went over and bound up his wounds and did what he could do and loaded him on his own animal and took him to an inn and told the innkeeper, take care of this man, nurse him back to health, do what has to be done. If I owe you any money, when I come back through, I'll pay you. Jesus said, which one of those three men do you think was a neighbor? And they all agreed. Well, it was a man that stopped to help. So who is my neighbor? Who is your neighbor? It's anyone we come in contact with that has a need that we can help out with. He said that we're to love our neighbor. Not only to love God, love our mates, love our neighbor. Then you know what he said? We're even to love our enemies. Well, now this gets tough. We're even to love our enemies. Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies. Do good unto them that despitefully use you. Most of the time, we want to get back at it. That's human. We just want to get back at it. You know? Jesus said, love your enemies. By the way, I don't think that the natural man or the love of the natural man will ever be able to accomplish that very well. It takes the love of God dwelling in your heart to love your enemies. I remember seeing on TV where these folks were killed in this church a while back. And I remember reading that some of the members said, we forgive you. And I thought, wow, if they really mean that, that's pretty big stuff. That's pretty big stuff. Love your enemies. Kind of like the two ladies in church one time that weren't getting along. They were, you know, one of them, they got mad at each other, and they had become enemies. And one of them found out she had cancer. And the other one went over to see her. And she said, I'm so sorry the way I've treated you. I just want you to know, please forgive me. I want to be your friend, not your enemy. And then she said, well, if you get well, what I just said is off. Sometimes that's the way we forgive people, isn't it? But we're to love our enemies. So what do we got? We're to love God supremely. We're to love our mates. We're to love our neighbor. We're to love our enemies. And even love our brethren. Matter of fact, Jesus said, by this you'll all know that you're my disciples, if you have love one for another. Now, I've got a little thing I like to tell people. Sometimes I'm not easy to love. I can be grumpy sometimes. Don't talk to my wife, because she'll verify that problem. But don't we all have our times that we're not as easy to love? Isn't that true? Sometimes, you know, we can all get on each other's nerves. That's just the human thing. But think about this just a minute. Well, let me put it this way. Someone said it best in a poem one time. They said, to live above with saints in love, that will be glory. But to dwell below with some I know, well, that's another story. Sometimes we're like that. But Jesus said, we're to love our brethren. As I have loved you, that you love one another. Now, here's my little thing. Why don't I behave myself and conduct my life in a way that makes it easy for people to love me? See, there's something I can do too. There may be a reason that person doesn't love me. Maybe I need to be more lovely or more lovable. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about a third preacher, and I said something about, I said, man, I just love that guy. Here's what he said. He said, what's not to love? That's what I'm talking about. What's not to love? Be that person. Got another day to live? another month, another year, who knows? But be that person that's easy to love. All right? So number one, I want to love more perfectly. Then number two, I want to witness more effectively. In Acts chapter 11, verse number 8, Jesus said, "Ye are my witnesses, or ye shall be witnesses unto me in Judea, Samaria, uttermost parts of the earth." We all know that scripture. Matthew chapter 28, go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. All right, I want to be a more effective witness, don't you? Listen, when we stand before the Lord one day, I think one of the things we're going to give an account for is what kind of witness we were. And I mentioned that we have a verbal witness and we have a silent witness. And the verbal witness is when we actually talk to somebody about the Lord. When we have that opportunity to share with them Jesus Christ. You know, I was a very bashful young man. You may find that hard to believe, but I was. I was a very bashful young man. I could never get up in front of anybody and speak. Doing what I'm doing right now would have never happened when I'm in school, I can tell you right now. And after I first got saved, our pastor preached on soul winning quite a bit. I was still working a job. I didn't surrender to preaching. But boy, he kept preaching on soul winning and being a good witness, and my heart just burned to witness to somebody, but I was afraid. It was a hard thing for me to do, to start a conversation and talk to somebody about the Lord. And I worked out south of Lakeland. I lived out north of Lakeland. So I had to go right through Lakeland. There's no easy way to get through Lakeland. I had to go right through Lakeland to get to the house. And one day I was going home, and I was praying, driving down the road in my car, and I said, "Lord, please let me witness to somebody. God, I got to witness to somebody. I'm going to burst, you know. I know I'm supposed to do it. I've got to do it. I need to break the ice." And there was a kid, and he was hitchhiking, had his thumb out. About a 13, 14-year-old boy, I suspect. And I thought, I'm going to give that boy a ride, and I'm going to witness to him. Now, I was probably 19, maybe 20 at the time. And I stopped, and I picked him up. We're in my car, we're heading through Lakeland. He was going to the other side of Lakeland, told me where he was going. And I kept saying, we talked about this and that and the other, where he went to school, all that kind of stuff. And boy, I kept saying under my breath, God, help me to witness to this boy. But I just couldn't get it done, you know. I just couldn't get it out. Lord, help me to witness to this boy. And just before we got to where we were going to let him out, well, I said, "Are you saved?" He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Oh, thank God." It was hard for me. It really was. But I want to be a more effective witness, don't you? Children, grandchildren, and I'm getting old enough now, great-grandchildren. I want to be a good witness to them. Witness verbally, but also a witness in the life that I live. When I pastored at Willow, that was my first church, which is on Highway 60, just a little bit west of Mulberry. Everybody around there at that time, this was back in 1965, back at that time, everybody around there just about worked at the mines. Mulberry revolved around the mines, or other companies that fed the mines. And so there's a lot of phosphate pits. And I love to fish, and I really loved to fish back then. So one afternoon, my wife was cooking supper, and I said, "How long before we're going to eat?" She said, "You know, it'll be a little while yet." I jumped in my car, and I drove down the phosphate pit, and I got out, and there was a mine truck sitting there, had the mine name on the door. And I got out, and I went down to where I used to sit and cast out to an old tree that had fallen over in the water. And there was a fellow sitting there. I walked down and I said, "You mind if I join you?" He said, "Not at all." And I sat down with him, and he worked at the mines, and he had stopped on his way home from work to try to catch a fish. And so we sat there, and I'm now pastor of a church. I'm doing a little bit better than I used to when I was witnessing. And I talked to him about the Lord, tried to talk to him about the Lord. And here's what he told me. I just want to share this with you, and I'm almost through, because it's so important. This is the silent witness that I talked about. He said, "You know," I told him I was a preacher and asked him if he was saved. He said no. He said, "You know, I work with a lot of men. And he said a lot of them go to church. Well, going to church doesn't mean you're Christian necessarily. Hopefully you are, but doesn't necessarily mean it. He said, I work with a lot of men that go to church. And he said, they asked me to go, but he said, preacher, I got to tell you. He said, I hear them tell dirty jokes. I know that a lot of them stop on the way home from work and drink. And he said, I can't say that they've got anything that I don't have. Well, he kind of had me in a bad spot, you know. And then he said this. He said, however, he says, you know, there's one guy that works with us that he said, I remember when he began to name off a bunch of bad things he used to do, about every one you can think of. And his expression was, but you know, he got religion. Well, he got more than just religion, folks. He got the Lord. And he said, I've never seen a change in any man's life like the change was in his life. He said, I'd have to say if anybody was a Christian, he probably was. And then he said this. He told me his name. And I said, yes! Because I was his pastor. Amen? Amen. So that silent witness, I want to be a good witness this year. I want to be a more effective witness than I've ever been. Verbally, yes, but also in the life that I live. And then last of all, I'll close with this thought. We enter into a new year. I want my life to be more surrendered to God. This is where the rubber really meets the road. In Acts chapter number 9, we know about the conversion of the Apostle Paul. He was struck with that light from heaven, and he cried out and said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And for the rest of his life, which was about another 30 years or more, the Apostle Paul went about doing that which God told him was his will for his life. And that's the way I want to live my life. Don't you? Doing the will of God. God, what is it you want me to do? What is it you would have me to do? That's what I want to do. And so as we face a new year, boy, let's love like God wants us to love. And let's be that witness that God wants us to be. And let's surrender our life and be that servant that God wants us to be. Would you bow your head? As we prepare for the invitation, and I